He's heard it all before. You're a pastor. You're not supposed to get political. You shouldn't be talking about these issues, so just stay out of politics and stick to preaching the gospel. Life, marriage, sexuality, borders, ethnicity. These things aren't political. They're biblical. God's word has much to say about the culture we're living in. This is Our Watch with Tim Thompson.
Well, hey everybody, happy Sunday to you. I am Tim Thompson. I'm the senior pastor of 412 Church in the Temecula Valley and also have a campus out in Idaho. If you're in the Idaho area, Treasure Valley specifically, or the Temecula Valley, or even North San Diego, we'd love to have you guys join us on a Sunday morning. We have 4 Sunday services, and it's always just a blessing to bring the Bible into your life. We do verse-by-verse teaching, verse-by-verse, chapter-by-chapter, precept upon precept, and we want people to walk away from church every Sunday knowing the Word of God better than when they walked in. So, again, we'd love to have you guys join us. We also have service online. You can get that at YouTube, 412 Church. We're all over the place, all the different social media outlets, so love to have you join us. But also today we've got a message from somebody who is an expert in American history and world history. He's going to be talking to you about Israel and maybe shed a little bit of light as to what is happening in the Middle East. And the man's name is Bill Federer, just an amazing man of God and an amazing biblical and historical mind. And today he's going to be talking about things we need to know. Why is Israel in the spotlight? What can we expect here in the next months and years? And who knows, maybe the Lord will be returning and calling his church home. We call that the rapture. If you want to be ready for that, we'd love to talk to you more. You can reach out to us, info@ourwatch.com. We'd love to share more about how you can be in a great relationship with the one true living God. We call him Jesus Christ. But today we've got this special message. At the end, we're going to let you know how you can get it in its entirety. So very important to get good, solid information. So again, our friend Bill Federer, here is an amazing message. Take a listen to this.
I wanted to talk about Israel and give you a little bit of the recent history. So in the 1800s, the Ottoman Empire, which dates back to like 1271, but the Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of Europe. And it would conquer other countries, and the Muslims didn't pay taxes. The conquered people paid the taxes. But as the conquered people began to assimilate or die off, their tax pay. So the Ottoman Empire was hurting financially. The Ottoman Empire is weakening, and the European powers are beginning to encroach onto it. And so Italy is now getting involved in Libya and France, French Algeria, the French Foreign Legion, the British in Egypt and Sudan, Russia. And so the Ottoman Empire is disintegrating. And right before World War I, it's pretty isolated. You have the Muslim Sultan is Abdul Hamid II, and the little country called Armenia wants to break away too. Right? Greece had broken away from the Ottoman Empire, and Armenia wants to. And this Ottoman Sultan, Abdul Hamid II, said no, and he kills like 100,000 of the Armenians. But the Ottoman Empire is still shrinking, and the European powers are taking parts of it. Now, question, where did oil come from in the 1800s? Came from whales, right? Moby Dick, and they're chasing these creatures around the world and then taking their blubber and sort of boiling it down. And then in 1859, you have oil discovered in Pennsylvania, Drake Oil Well. And then it's discovered in Oklahoma. And then it's discovered in the Middle East. And then with Europe industrializing, right? So Winston Churchill changes the British Navy from coal to oil. And there's only one oil well in all of England, in the Sherwood Forest of all places. And so the British do a deal with Persia, Iran. It's called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. And you know it better as BP. BP, British Petroleum, is the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Well, guess what? Germany industrializes, and it doesn't have any oil wells, so Germany makes a treaty with the Ottoman Empire. And so they have the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad. And so you have the German Kaiser Wilhelm II making a treaty with the Muslim Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II. And then the Germans began to stir the Turks into their jihad mode. If you saw the movie The Promise with Christian Bale, and it documents, I was actually with an Armenian guy just 2 weeks ago, and he said the movie is really, really accurate. So it shows how the Turks and Armenians were sort of getting along, but the Germans come in and stir them up into the war mode, and the Germans say, look, we will give you guns, because they made these brand new rifles and machine guns. We'll give you guns in exchange for oil, called an Arms Oil Agreement. And so half of World War I was fought in the Middle East over oil. And you had Britain siding with Iran, Persia, and the Germany siding with the Turks. And there's a little country called Armenia. And Woodrow Wilson wanted America to come to Armenia's rescue. And so now, not only did Abdul Hamid II kill 100,000 Armenians, now you have the Young Turks. These are 3 Turkish leaders, and they kill over 1 million of these Armenians. And so World War I ends, and you have the map of Europe redrawn. And guess what? The German Empire is whittled away, and it's given to the other countries. Well, same thing happens in the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire is now being divided up. And so you have Russia wanting a little sliver of it, Italy wanting a little sliver of it, and England and France. And so it's called the Sykes-Picot Treaty. And then one important ingredient is Britain was running short of explosives, which is a big deal if you're fighting a war. They needed a solvent called acetone in this process to make the explosives. And so they had a Jewish chemist named Chaim Weizmann. He came from Russia. Remember Fiddler on the Roof, the Jews fleeing from Russia? And Chaim Weizmann's family goes to Britain, and he comes up, he's a chemist, he comes up with a bacterial fermentation process to make acetone. And then now the British have plenty of acetone, plenty of explosives. They win the war, and after the war, they want to thank Chaim Weizmann and make him a sir or a knight. And he said, well, I would really like a homeland for the Jewish people. And the British are like, well, hey, we got Uganda. How about we give you Uganda? And he's like, well, I was really thinking of the traditional area. And they go, oh, sure, yeah, the Middle East. And so they issue the Balfour Declaration. And it says, His Majesty's government has looked with favor upon establishing in Palestine, homeland for the Jewish people. Now, where did the idea come from for the Jews going back to the Middle East? Jeffrey Alderman wrote in the Jewish Chronicle, November 8th, 2012, the Balfour Declaration was born out of religious sentiment. Arthur Balfour was a Christian mystic who believed that the Almighty had chosen him to be an instrument of the divine will, the purpose of which was to restore to the Jews their ancient homeland, perhaps as a precursor to the second coming of the Messiah. The Balfour Declaration was thus intended to assist in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This appealed to Lloyd George, Prime Minister, believing in the prophecies in the Bible he knew inside and out. So lo and behold, the Zionist movement was birthed out of a Christian revival. So after the Revolutionary War, in America, you had something called the Second Great Awakening Revival. You had camp meetings in Kentucky where they'd have like 20,000 people show up in the woods, and they'd set up tents, so they called them camp meetings because they would camp out. And then they began to discover in the Bible that Jesus is going to come back and rule and reign for 1,000 years. It's been in the Bible the whole time, but prior to the revolution, they're more interested in breaking away from the king and other stuff in there. But now, so they're called millennialists because these are people that finally realize Jesus is going to come back and rule and reign for 1,000 years. Now, when he's going to come back is the question that everybody always wants to know the answer of, but the fact that he's coming back. And so these millennialists began to see the prophecies that the Jews are supposed to be back in the Holy Land for these prophecies to come to pass. So the Christians of the Second Great Awakening Revival would go to the synagogues and tell the Jews, you need to think about going back there. They planted the seed. And so that influenced Theodor Herzl, and he took this idea and said, we need to actually make it happen. He organized the first Zionist Congress in 1897 in Switzerland. And one of the notable Christians that attended it was Henry Dunant, the founder of the International Red Cross. He's the first recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. And so Henry Dunant was a Christian nationalist, right? I mean, he was a Zionist, a Christian Zionist. And anyway, so Lord Balfour addressed a Jewish gathering, February 7th, 1918. My personal hope is that Jews will make good in Palestine and eventually found a Jewish state. It is up to them now. We have given them their great opportunity. So the land that the Jews were given was the exact boundaries that God had promised Moses. I mean, it went from the Mediterranean over to Iraq and Syria and down to Arabia and Egypt. It was huge. Somebody threw a monkey wrench in the works. Lawrence of Arabia, he was a British lieutenant stationed in Cairo, and he was sent on a simple reconnaissance assignment. Go meet with the Arab Muslim leader in Mecca, the Sharif, and see if the Arab Muslims would help the British is where the Hajj is. So 5 pillars of Islam. The 5th one is once in your life, you're supposed to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. And so the Sharif's in charge of Mecca. And so he has this attitude of get along. And he's what Lawrence called a modernist. And he was really relatively moderate. And he was wanting all these different flavors of Muslims to get along. And he was wanting to get along with the Jews and wanting to get along with the British and sort of a wanting to get along guy. And even during the Armenian massacre that I talked about already, this Sharif sends a message in 1918 to the Syrians: protect and take good care of everyone of the Jacobite Armenian community living in your territories, and defend them as you would defend yourselves. They are the protected people of the Muslims. So he's a nice guy, and the British decide they're going to have to honor Lawrence of Arabia's promise. So they take the Sharif's son, Fazl, and they make him king of a brand new country called Iraq. Iraq used to be part of the Ottoman Empire, but now it's a brand new country. And so they put Fazl in. Now, Fazl thought, because of Lawrence of Arabia's promise, he was going to get all of it, Iraq and Syria. And the French wanted Syria. So now we have a problem. So now we have World War I is over. The Ottoman Empire is divided up. And a brand new country is created called Iraq, and Fazl's the head of it. France takes control of Syria, but Fazl thought he was going to get Syria. And so you have tensions. And Fazl's brother Abdullah wants to start another war against the French that have come in to occupy Syria. So you have Winston Churchill, and he comes up with a solution. Take 2/3 of the land that we gave to the Jews and take it away and create another brand new country called Jordan. And take Abdullah, Fazl's brother, and another son of the Sharif of Mecca, and make Abdullah king of Jordan. So now we have the Sharif of Mecca, who worked with Lawrence of Arabia to help the Arab Muslims defeat the Turkish Muslims. His one son, Fazl, is king of Iraq. His other son, Abdullah, is king of Jordan. And Abdullah's a pretty nice guy, in getting along with the Jews. This is what Abdullah wrote. No people on earth have been less anti-Semitic than the Arabs. The persecution of the Jews has been confined almost entirely to Christian nations in the West, right? Talking about the Inquisition and then the killings and then the Hitler killing Jews. And he goes on, Jews themselves will admit that never since the Great Dispersion, that's when the temple was destroyed and the Jews were scattered by the Romans, did Jews develop so freely and reach such importance as in Spain when it was an Arab possession. So after the Jews were driven out of the Holy Land, they migrated to Spain, and Spain had the biggest Jewish population in Europe until they were driven out. And anyway, with very minor exception, Jews have lived in many centuries in the Middle East in complete peace and friendliness with Arab neighbors. So Greece wanted a little bit, and the Turks and Armenia wanted a little bit, but Turkey rallied with their leader Ataturk, and he kept Turkey from being totally divided up. And Ataturk was a secular leader. So Ataturk is this leader among the Arab world. He says he is a weak ruler who needs religion to uphold his government. Ataturk says, even before accepting the religion of the Arabs, the Turks were a great nation. Mohammedanism was based on Arab nationalism above all nationalities. The purpose of the religion founded by Muhammad over all nations was to drag them into including Arab national politics. It might have suited tribes in the desert. It is no good for a modern progressive state. And so we have the leader of Iran, the Shah. He's more secular, meeting with Eisenhower, meeting with Truman. You have Iran in the 60s and 70s becoming westernized. You have Fuad is overthrown in Egypt, and Nasser comes in, and the women are wearing stylish clothes, and there's Cairo, Egypt beaches, looks like, Southern California. And here's Gamal Nasser in Egypt, 1958. I met with the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he sat with me and made his request. What did he request? To make wearing the hijab mandatory in Egypt and to demand that every woman walking the streets wear a hijab. I told him my opinion is that every person in his own house decides for himself the rules. He replied, no, as the leader, you are responsible. I told him, sir, you have a daughter in the School of Medicine, and she's not wearing a tarha, scarf. If you're unable to make one girl who's your daughter wear a tarha, you want me to put a tarha on 10 million women myself? All right? And so the whole Muslim world was moving in a westerly direction, but something happened. Why did it go into what we have today? Remember this guy, the Sharif of Mecca? The British want to force him to make some more concessions. And he waffled. And the British are like, you know what? We made 2 of your sons kings, and if you're not going to play with us, we're going to sit back and let this desert wandering Abdul Aziz ibn Saud throw you out. And so this is the beginning of Saudi Arabia. And so the Sauds drive out the Sharif of Mecca. The Saud families were Wahhabi, and Wahhabis were what Lawrence of Arabia said, Wahhabis followers of a fanatical Muslim heresy. Everything imposed their strict rules. Everything was forcibly pious, forcibly puritanical. William McCants writes, Saudis promote a very toxic form of Islam that draws sharp lines between a small number of true believers and everyone else, Muslim and non-Muslim. So in other words, Wahhabis are just as happy to kill a moderate Muslim as they are to kill an infidel. Justice Robert Jackson, Supreme Court, and he says, Islamic law offers American lawyers study in dramatic contrast. The law of the Middle East is the antithesis of Western law. So where we would punish the person that committed the rape, in Sharia law, they punish the woman who was raped for allowing herself to be used as a tool of Satan to tempt the man, and she gets whipped 100 times. It's like totally opposite. And so this Wahhabi, now Saudi version of Islam, so it's not a hardware problem, it's a software problem. It's not, we don't hate the people, right? We hate this Saudi teaching and this Wahhabi teaching. So Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, he's got his many wives, 45 sons, and he's promoting this fundamental Wahhabi version of Islam. Since he now controls Mecca and the Hajj, the pilgrims coming there, they're all getting infected with Wahhabism. But then the second one is oil. So Standard Oil Company discovers oil in Saudi Arabia, and now within one generation, they go from the poorest Muslim country to the richest Muslim country. And they become a magnet for fundamentalism. And you have Aramco, the Arab American Oil Company, and the Saudis. What do they do with their money? They end up wanting to spread their Wahhabi teachings. And these teachings influence every terrorist group today. And so here's FDR writing to this rabbi saying, hey, Americans support the Jews going back to their Holy Land. Now, The same way the British waffled on their promises to the Sharif of Mecca, well, guess what? They also waffled on their promises to the Jews. So in Balfour Declaration 1917, you can go back. Well, guess what? In 1922, the British said no more going back. And they passed the White Papers, which basically limited Jewish immigration back to the Holy Land. So you have the 1928, the Muslim Brotherhood has started. And the Muslim Brotherhood takes the Wahhabi Saudi teachings and actually puts it into an actual game plan. And so the Muslim Brotherhood takes it and does this infiltration thing where you infiltrate all these countries in the Middle East, just pretending to be a moderate Muslim. And then when you get the signal, you flip and become a violent Muslim and do assassinations. And so, you got Hitler meeting with the Sharif of Mecca, and he's raising up Bosnian Muslim panzer divisions to fight along with Hitler to kill the Jews. And then Roosevelt is coming back from the Yalta Conference, where he gives away half of Europe to the communists. Roosevelt was just a couple months before he died, and he decides to have his boat stop in the Suez Canal and meet with the Saudi king, Aziz ibn Saud, and he meets with him. And he does an arms for oil agreement. Sort of same thing the Germans did. America will give arms to Saudi Arabia in exchange for Saudi Arabia giving oil to America, and Saudi Arabia agreeing to sell oil in what's called the petrodollar. So all the oil that Saudi Arabia sells, they'll only sell it in the dollar, which means all these other countries have to use the dollar, which means the dollar's the international exchange currency, which means America can inflate it and everybody else has to live with it. Unfortunately, we're faced with, under Biden, he refused a bunch of phone calls from the king of Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi Arabia king said, well, you know what? I'm just going to sell oil in yuan to China, and I'm not going to have to use the dollars anymore. And now you have what's called BRICS, where you have British, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and they're beginning to sell oil in something other than dollars, which everybody's wondering when it's going to hit the fan, because it could cause tremendous inflation. Roosevelt suggested that Saudi Arabia help the Jews go back to the Holy Land after World War II, because the Nazis were killing Jews. And the Saudi Arabian crazy fundamentalist blindsides FDR and says, Jews are terrible, terrible, terrible. And FDR says, whoa, okay, thanks, I didn't know all that. And so FDR gets back to America and writes a letter to this Aziz ibn Saud, and he says, I want to assure you that I would take no action in capacity of chief executive with regards to the question of Palestine. In other words, FDR promises the Saudi king that America will not recognize the Jewish nation. But you had Britain, and it had the British mandate. So the British created the Balfour Declaration. They cut 2/3 of it away, gave it to the Jordanians. But the British were still like America was a protector of, the Philippines after the Spanish-American War for several decades. So the British were protecting the Middle East. But once Truman started the United Nations, the British said, this is our chance to unload this problem. And so the British set a date. They just picked a date. They said on May 15th, 1948, the Middle East is the problem for the United Nations. Now the clock's ticking, and Israel has to decide, wait a second, we're either going to be absorbed into Jordan or what? And so they want to create their own nation, and Harry S. Truman decides to have the U.S. recognize Israel as a nation.
Well, you've been listening to a message by Bill Federer. As you can tell, as you've been tuning in, this is a man with an incredible mind. He knows what has happened, and he knows what is happening, and even knows what's going to happen. So very important to get these type of information into your mind. And if you want to get this message in its entirety, you can go to ourwatch.com or 412 Temecula. That's TEMECULA.com. All of our messages are there, and we'd love to have you take a listen.
This has been a production of Our Watch with Tim Thompson. We hope you're encouraged to engage the culture around you. We want to invite you to connect with Pastor Tim by going to the Connect page on ourwatch.com. That's OURWatch.com. Until next time, this is all of us at Our Watch reminding you to be bold, be strong, and to take back the public square.